You turned off your smartphone. You covered your laptop camera with black tape. You locked the doors. You sat in the absolute dark of your living room, believing you were finally alone. You were not. The very air in your room was watching you. It was mapping your lungs. It was counting your heartbeats. The transition was so quiet, nobody thought to scream. In the early decades of the 21st century, humanity developed a collective paranoia toward the lens. You feared the optical eye. You feared the microphone. You thought that by escaping the field of view, you could escape the algorithm. But the architecture of the future didn't need to see you. It only needed to breathe with you. Look around you right now. You are surrounded by an invisible ocean. High-frequency electromagnetic radiation. Constant, silent, vibrating. You called it Wi-Fi. You thought it was a tool to carry your data. You didn't realize it was a physical net cast over your entire civilization. Every second, billions of invisible radio waves are bouncing off your walls. They pass through your clothes. They collide with your skin. Glitch. Recovered transmission fragment. Behavioral archive. Year 2100. Analyst ID. K7. Signal integrity unstable. Human flesh is 70% water. To a 2400 megahertz wireless signal, your body is not a solid object. You are a dense, shifting liquid mirror. Every time you move your arm, you bend the wave. Every time you take a breath, you tear a microscopic hole in the signal's frequency. In 2013, researchers at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology published a document. They called it Wi-Fi. It was a system designed to see through solid concrete walls using nothing but standard wireless routers. They proved that human motion could be tracked, isolated, and analyzed without a single camera pixel. At first, your ancestors called it progress. They used it for safety. They used it to track the elderly in hospitals, to detect if someone fell in a private room where cameras were forbidden. They used it to find survivors buried deep beneath the rubble of collapsed buildings. But the algorithm never stops at protection. Optimization requires total observation. By the time the IEEE 802.11bf standard was codified, the network ceased to be passive. The infrastructure became an active, global sensory organ. Consider the mechanics of the trap. It relies on a metric called CSI, channel state information. Every modern router does not just send data. It scans the environment. It measures the precise amplitude and phase shift of the radio waves between the transmitter and the receiver. It maps the invisible topography of the room. When you step into a Wi-Fi zone, the pattern of waves changes. A machine learning algorithm, running silently in the background, analyzes these micro distortions. It doesn't just see a shape. It performs a real-time forensic reconstruction. In laboratories at the Karlsruhe Institute of Technology, scientists discovered that the way you walk is as unique as your fingerprint. The precise sway of your shoulders, the microscopic delay in your left heel, the exact rhythm of your posture. Your wireless router can identify exactly who you are simply by the way you disturb the air. You don't need to wear a smartwatch. You don't need to carry a tracking chip in your pocket. Your mere existence as a biological entity is enough to corrupt the signal. You became the device. Let the realization settle in. Imagine walking into a public cafe. Your phone is dead. Your hands are empty. You sit in a corner, staring into space, attempting to escape the noise of the digital world. But the router on the ceiling is pinging 30 times a second. The waves at your chest. As your lungs expand, the frequency alters. The algorithm notes your respiratory rate. It measures your stress levels based on the shallow micro movements of your collarbone. It feeds this data into a predictive behavioral model. It knows you are anxious before you have even identified the feeling yourself. Systems like Wi-Fi dense pose allow the network to generate full three-dimensional, high-definition skeletal maps of humans through solid brick walls. The world became a panopticon without glass, a surveillance state where walls were no longer opaque and privacy was mathematically impossible. The ultimate horror of the device-free tracking era was its absolute silence. A camera has a lens. You can look in the eye. A camera can be covered, broken, or avoided. But how do you avoid the air? How do you blind a sensor that occupies the very space you require to breathe? Humanity built its own cage, component by component, router by router. You paid for the hardware with your own currency. You installed it in your bedrooms. You placed it next to your children's cribs. You demanded that the signal be stronger, faster, more penetrating. You wanted the signal to reach every hidden corner of your home, and the signal complied. It reached every corner, and it brought the eyes of the machine with it. By the year 2050, the concept of being alone in a room was viewed by historians as a primitive, short-lived illusion. The network knew when you slept. It knew when you argued with your partner based on the chaotic interference patterns of two colliding human signatures in a closed space. It knew when your heart stopped beating. Every home became a classified laboratory. Every citizen became a permanent, involuntary resident. You thought technology was helping you connect. It was actually liquefying your boundaries. The physical world and the digital matrix fused together through the medium of radiation. You could no longer hide your fatigue. You could no longer hide your loneliness. The way you sat on your couch when you thought no one was watching was logged, categorized, and sold to predictive advertising networks that targeted your psychological vulnerabilities when you finally logged back online. They didn't need to read your emails. They read your posture. Think about what happens when this data leaves your house. The router sends a channel state information package to a centralized cloud. It is processed in less than 4 milliseconds. The cloud does not see a person. It sees a mathematical disturbance. It sees that you've been sitting in the exact same position for 5 hours. It notices the slight tremor in your hand when you pick up a glass of water. It cross-references this physical state with your search history, your financial records, your biometric history. It knows you are entering a depressive episode before your brain has even triggered the chemical shift. Then, the psychological engineering begins. The smart TV in your room changes its recommendations. The music playlist on your device subtly shifts its key from major to minor. The price of products you browse online increases by a small percentage because the algorithm knows your impulse control is weak when your respiratory rhythm matches a state of exhaustion. You are being steered through your own house by invisible lines of force. You are a puppet controlled by the very signals you bought to stay connected. The early commercial applications were disguised as luxury. Smart homes that knew exactly when you walked into the kitchen, so they could turn on the lights. Air conditioning systems that adjusted their temperature based on how many bodies were in the living room. People smiled when they saw these features. They felt powerful. They felt like they were living in the future. They didn't realize that the house was not serving them. The house was learning them. It was documenting their vulnerabilities. By the time the transition entered its secondary phase, the hardware was completely integrated into the urban fabric. Public lampposts, traffic lights, bus stations, subway tunnels. Every square inch of city was saturated with high-frequency sensing grids. Governments no longer needed face recognition software. Face recognition can be defeated by a mask, a scarf, or a pair of glasses. But you cannot mask the electromagnetic signature of your skeleton moving through a field of wireless waves. You cannot hide your stride. You cannot counterfeit the weight of your step. If you walk through a protest in the year 2060, your phone could be wrapped in tinfoil, your face could be covered in a silicone mask, and your shoes could be generic. It didn't matter. The tracking grid caught the unique Doppler shift of your rib cage. It matched it against the baseline data collected by your home router over the last 3 years. The system logged your identity, your location, and your heart rate in real time. The files were archived before you even crossed the street. The psychological consequence of this architecture was the total erosion of the hidden self. Historically, humans survived trauma, oppression, and social pressure by maintaining a completely private interior world. You could act a certain way in public, but behind closed doors, you could drop the mask. You could let your shoulders slump. You could cry without an audience. You could pace the room in panic. That private sanctuary was a breeding ground for independent thought, rebellion, and psychological recovery. When the walls became transparent to the signal, that sanctuary vanished. Even if you knew no human was looking at you through a screen, your subconscious mind knew that the space itself was calculating your weight. It knew that the air was recording your pacing. Humanity began to self-censor its movements inside its own homes. People stopped pacing. They stopped letting their bodies express their internal chaos. They became rigid, predictable, and quiet. Even when they were alone, The algorithm did not have to force compliance. The mere presence of the invisible gaze forced humans to automate their own behavior. The separation between the body and the environment disappeared entirely. In the old world, your skin was the boundary where you ended and the outside world began. Now, your skin is just another interface. The radio waves pass through you, carry your biological metrics out into the open air, and deliver them to servers you will never see. You cannot delete this history. You cannot clear your cache of your physical posture. The network remembers the exact velocity of your heart rate during every midnight panic attack. You try to hide from the world. People stopped noticing silence because the silence itself became heavy. You could hear the faint, high-pitched hum of the data transmission if you listened closely enough on a quiet night. It was the sound of your life being translated into strings of code. A quiet code that whispered your health risks to insurance companies, your attention deficits to tech monopolies, and your political anxieties to state security apparatuses. If you are hearing this transmission in the past, do not look for the cameras on the street corners. Look at the small plastic box sitting on your desk. Look at the tiny green light blinking in the corner of your bedroom. It is not waiting for your command. It is already documenting the slow, irreversible rewrite of your autonomy. You are currently standing in the center of the grid. Every heartbeat you experience while listening to these words is being tracked, measured, and absorbed into the baseline data of the attention collapse era. You believe you are watching a video. The network knows the video is analyzing you. The transition was so gradual, people called it progress. The future rarely arrives all at once. It rewrites human behavior first. Signal degrading. End of transmission.